Hello there. My name is Dan Skipout, and this is the 52 must-see movies and why they matter, season 2. This is a special episode where I'm going to be celebrating the 30th anniversary of an absolute classic, Bull Durham. We're going off the book in season 2, and I'm really going off the season 2 list of movies that we have chosen to do a special episode of Bull Durham. And with me, an old face, an old soul, my buddy, Stephen Billings. Welcome back to do this special episode talking about the 30th anniversary of Bull Durham.
Yeah, man, it's awesome to be back. So I guess is this 53 must-see movies? And are we messing it up a little bit?
Well, maybe. I just had to do this special episode because there's so much cultural relevance to Bull Durham, and who else would I choose? The guy, he lives right by Durham, North Carolina.
About 45 minutes to an hour away from Durham. I mean, I could go to a Durham Bulls game.
So you have a little bit more you could say about the people and the kind of world that they were living in back then, even though you were a little
I was being born when this movie came out, so
you were just that old. But as you grow older, you know the people, you know the
yeah. I mean, I know the baseball culture. I used to play baseball growing up, and I've been to that. I've been to Durham. I've been to see a Durham Bulls game before. I mean, I know the area. I know how the vibe. I know the vibes. I know how the baseball culture is. But we'll get into that,
Absolutely. And with the 30th anniversary, we have a man named Ron Shelton who basically played the game. He was in the game, and he took his things that he remembered from the game of baseball, and he wrote them and he directed. He wrote and directed this movie. And this guy's not really a big name writer and director, but he wrote and directed this movie because
yeah, he's known for being he mostly through his career did mostly the stuff he's known for is sports movies. He also did Tin Cup with Kevin Costner also, and the one my probably other than Bull Durham, my favorite of his is White Man Can't Jump, which I really love. So yeah,
3 great sports movies. So I mean, he obviously knows the game. He knows the games. He knows the sports world. So he was able to direct some good sports movies, basketball, golf, and baseball. But we're here to talk about Bull Durham. So Ron Shelton, this is his experiences in the game of baseball, and it also stars Tim Robbins as Nuke LaLoosh. That's his nickname, but his real name is Calvin. He's called Calvin Nuke LaLoosh. It's Susan Sarandon plays Annie Savoy, and Savoy. It sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Well, The Natural. Bobby, go pick me out a winner. The Savoy Special. So there's a connection with The Natural and Bull Durham. But the star, I mean, I guess all 3 are really the stars. Kevin Costner as Crash Davis. And Crash Davis is, a typical type of character that Kevin Costner would play over the years. This is kind of early on in his career before he became the Oscar-winning director and the big star that he had become later on in the 80s and 90s.
Well, this is right before, like you said, right before he kind of became the biggest actor in Hollywood. This came out in '88, and this was right before Field of Dreams. And then after Field of Dreams happened, he then did Dances with Wolves, which he won the Best Picture in the director, and then of course throughout the early to mid '90s, he was pretty relevant. He did a lot of stuff. So
no, yeah, I know you and I are fans of Kevin Costner. He's kind of one of these guys that kind of Kevin Costner. I don't care what people think. I absolutely think this guy's an American icon, and his films show what an icon he really is. And so let's get into talking about the film a little bit here. We also have another guy who's been in a baseball movie, Robert Wall. He was in Cobb. He plays the assistant coach in this film. So we have some ties to other sports movies, other baseball movies.
Rob Shelton also directed Cobb.
Get out of here! Did he really? Jeez, I guess I should have been doing my homework.
Should have looked up the filmography of Rob Shelton.
Ron Shelton. Oh man, I can't. I mean, I just kill myself. You're killing me here.
Good thing I was on here today.
Yeah, you're saving me, Stephen. You're saving me, Stephen. All right, so we get Annie. She narrates the film. She's like the narrator. She's like the pulse of the film because she basically is the constant in this world of baseball and rookies and people coming and going. She's the constant. So she's the narrator. And she always hooks up with one athlete every year, one new player every year. And this year she's got basically two players she's looking at. One, the new rookie player, Calvin Nuke Lelouch, and Crash Davis.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, if somebody hasn't seen this movie, the thing you got to remember going into it is as much of it is a baseball movie, it is also kind of a romance film, and I think it plays really well against each other because it's not just the romance between the characters, but I think it romances the game because I think baseball is one of the most has the most romantic aspects about it compared to other sports. Because other sports like football, where it's a lot of violence, a lot of contact, there's not much romance to that. It's not graceful, or something like basketball is very, high octane, back and forth. It's not. There's no moments of anticipation really. It's just a lot of it's really fast paced. But baseball has a lot of anticipation. And things happen, and that you don't expect to happen, and it can take one player to do it here, one teammate over here in the outfield catching a ball that almost is a home run, or things happen, and it's a lot more romantic. And I think that's what this movie does really well, is show you the qualities of baseball that that really is what make people still call it the American pastime, and why I think it's still my favorite sport. So
no, it's you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm wearing a Boston Red Sox hat, so you know how much I love the game of baseball, and I know you're a huge Baltimore Orioles fan.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. I'm mad at them this year. So
yeah, I don't blame you. There's an actual really a guy that's in the movie. He's at the beginning of the movie, and he's a guy, they call him the Clown Prince of Baseball, and his name is Max Patkin. And he comes out and he does all these faces and maneuvers with his arms and legs and he gets the crowds into the games. And there's a real guy.
He's basically the mascot, Yeah.
But he does it. He goes from team to team. He doesn't stay in one place. He always goes around to different places. And he's a real guy. Max Patkin was a real guy, and he did this for his job. This is his job. I mean, when you see him out on the field doing all the gyrations and the faces, then you see him later on in a bar. He doesn't even look like himself. He looks completely different, So one of the things that goes on with these is we have these women. Obviously, Annie, I said, she's a narrator, but also we have another kind of girl that follows the team, and her name is Millie. And when we first see Nuke Lelouch, her and Millie and him are getting it on. But she's going to have a kind of a change of heart or something later on in the film. So we'll find out more about Millie later on.
My favorite moment in that scene at the beginning there, I love, as you say, they're getting it on, and I love her nickname for him is Pokey, and obviously that is a reference to the fact that they were just boning a second ago.
And something that's also with great movies, sometimes they have great soundtracks and great scores. And this film does have some really good songs. And one of my favorite all-time songs is, Bill Haley in the comments. The song that's a good time. Happy Days, the Happy Days song.
The songs you hear constantly at minor league baseball stadiums every day. It's the playlist. Yeah.
I love that song. I could listen to that song. I mean, there's so many those old songs. I got so much listening to those, because when my parents, they would just pack us all in the car and just drive somewhere, and you just put a station on. One day it would be the oldies, one day it would be the Irish station. So I love a lot of those old songs. I can whistle along and sing along. We also have some other characters in the movie. Joe Riggins, he's the coach. Jimmy, he's kind of like a new rookie, kind of innocent guy. Deke, Bobby, Jose, these are all players on the team. And they all play their part, but the main two guys are Crash and Nuke LaLoosh, or Calvin Nuke LaLoosh. And so we have this situation where Calvin's not doing so well. He can't throw strikes, so they bring in a new catcher, and of course that's Crash Davis. And he ends up meeting up with them at a bar, and they start talking. And him and Max, of course, are old buddies, because he's made his bones. He's been playing for 10 years in the minors. Crash has.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the important thing to remember about Crash is I think it's actually 12 years.
12 years.
I looked it up before. He's been in the minors for 12 years, and now they're bringing him back down to Single A just to help this pitcher along. And one of my favorite moments in the movie is a moment where, right as they tell him in the office, like, this is what you're gonna do, and he gets upset. He's pissed off, and he's just like, I'm out of here. I quit, and he leaves. And then like a couple seconds later, he comes back and he's like, who do we play tomorrow? And he's just like, yeah, okay, yeah. Because he can't help it. He loves the game, and he's just like, I get to play baseball is my job, so he can't help it. So then he's just like, I'm back. But yeah, and then they go to the bar, and he's, Calvin's being his overly confident, cocky self, dancing with all the girls, being kind of an ass, and then tries to pick a fight with Crash.
Absolutely. I was just about to get that. Crash is like out in the parking lot. He's all right, let's, because they were going to dance, and she didn't want to dance with him, and he wanted her to, Annie, to dance with him, and
you're not gonna fight over little old me, are you?
Yeah. So yeah, oh yeah, she does that. That's
she knows. She's antagonizing it. Yes.
Oh yeah. So they end up in the parking lot, and he says, "Hit me with a pitch." And he said, "I'm not hitting you with a pitch," because he says, "I don't fight. I don't get in fights." He's like, "Hit me with a pitch," and instead of hitting him with the pitch, he throws him.
Yeah, he tells him, he's like, from what I hear, you couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat, or something like that. And he's like, I'll kill you with this pitch. He's like, and then he throws it, and then of course it doesn't hit him, and it hits the window behind him, and and embarrasses him, and then he has to punch him. Good punch.
Yeah, and then he says, let me buy you a drink. Let me go buy you a drink. And then
I'm your new catcher.
I'm your new catcher. Yeah. So
and then Tim Robbins is just like, yeah, it's my new catcher.
Yeah. So then they both end up going to Annie's place, and this is how Annie figures out which one that she wants for the season, because she gets a new guy each season, and she figures out which one she wants for the season. Then they
well, she figures it out once Crash decides he isn't going to have any part of it, because he's mature man, and he's like, I'm not interested in anybody that's interested in that boy, as he says, and then he has that great speech that I think that the movie's really well known for, where he ends the speech where he's like, I like these long wet kisses that last for 3 days. And that's like the big line in the movie that people remember. And then he storms off, and then she's like, oh my,
Yeah. And then, she ends up giving,
kind of by default, Lelouch becomes the boy, the guy for the season.
And in the nickname she gives him is Nuke because he's like, he just goes off. Sometimes he just goes off. And so he ends up getting the nickname Loosh after the whole thing with Crash, no pun intended, crashes. And, so Crash ends up being the odd man out while Lelouch ends up being the main guy. And then we get one of the players, Jose, and this is where I said that other movies have been they use some, and he uses some beads, and he puts his beads all over the bat. He's rubbing the bat.
Being superstitious.
Yeah. So who does that remind you of? We all know who.
Well, okay. We were talking before this, and I brought up Major League, and you said that this was like kind of like an inspiration to that. I would say, I mean, the thing is these movies came out literally a year apart, so I don't know how much of an inspiration. I don't know that they literally took it from that, because one came out in '88 and Major League came out in '89. So I don't know that they saw that movie and then suddenly threw that into Major League, which was probably already done filming or in the middle of filming, possibly. I don't know, but
okay.
But yeah, I mean, we know that superstition's a big deal with baseball players, whether it's wearing the same socks, or wearing their same jock strap, whatever the hell it is, the bat or the right helmet, or doing the same routines. So that's sometimes some kind of spiritual thing, is something that some players do, so. And Crash is kind of against it, but then he's like, "Hey, give me that. Give me some of that."
Later on in the movies, I hear, "Rub that on my back."
Rub that on my bat.
That was kind of good. And of course, these guys, even with Crash helping out Nuke Lelouch, they can't win any games.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the first game Nuke pitches, he like hits the mascot with the ball. It's kind of the thing. That's actually something I would say has been shown in other movies. Like I think later on into the '90s, that movie, like the Major League movie, not Major League, but Little Big League, or one of them, like kid Rookie of the Year. I think he hits the mascot in that movie. It's kind of becomes a thing. But yeah, I mean, he hits the mascot. These balls are nowhere close, and Crash has to slow. I mean, the thing is between Crash and Susan Sarandon's character, it's about they both in a way kind of work together to wrangle him, and a lot of it is just getting him to not think so much and just to throw, there's one great moment where the other thing is that part of that not thinking is letting Crash call the pitches, letting him tell him what to throw, because he knows the batters better than him. That's part of a catcher's job, and he decides to go against him. So then Crash just tells the batter of the other team what pitch is coming, and then he hits a home run.
That's his way of getting back at him.
Yeah, he's like, okay, so now you want to listen to me, and then after that, things start to go great. Like he starts to strike people out. He's working his way to being a better pitcher, and it's kind of where the middle of the movie goes to, is where Lelouch is finally starting to really listen.
But the coach basically is like beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. He asks Crash for some advice, and Crash says, "You know what? Just go crazy. Just go crazy on them, and you might, they might respond to it." And so he takes a pile of bats and he throws them in the shower. And he says, "Everybody get in the shower." He calls them all lollygaggers. He says, "We got a 12-game road trip. We got to get this summer. You guys got to win. Do you guys want to win? Do you guys want to just be a bunch of losers and all this?"
You're lollygagging over here and you're lollygagging over there. You're just a bunch of lollygaggers.
So we get the road trip, and of course, Crash and Lelouch, Nuke, get in a fight on a bus, and this is another thing that just brings the team together. They start figuring it out on this road trip. And one time they decide, you know what, we need a night off. Let's flood the field. Let's flood the field, and all the guys are out there sliding on the mud, and so they end up getting a rain out because the field's all wet and muddy, and so they could just hang out and have fun and drink beer.
Yeah, and one thing with Crash Davis that we come to find out at some point in the movie is that apparently he's on the verge of breaking the home run record for the minor leagues, and he's kind of like him and Susan Sarandon had these kind of like couple conversations while at a batting cage, and he's kind of like embarrassed by it, and she finds it to be a great thing, and I think with the Kevin Costner character, I think part of what eventually happens to him throughout this the arc of this movie is that he's a guy that has to realize that he's maybe met his end, kind of met his end of being what his dream is over, but he can still have a happy life maybe with her, is kind of where the character's going, but he's got to figure out who he is first and where he's got to be,
Yeah, and then we get a interesting scene where Nuke is dreaming, and it's a crazy dream. But then he wakes up from the dream, and Kevin Costner's Crash goes, "Oh, you were just dreaming," and it was like a really crazy dream, and then Annie tries to help him out once again, and Annie tries to show him some things that he's doing with his pitching, so because she's been around the game, even though she's kind of like the I don't know what you would call her, like the traveling girlfriend or whatever, but
the baseball groupie.
There you go, traveling baseball groupie. She knows the game because she watches a lot of games. She knows the tendencies that players have, and she's trying to help him out by giving him some advice. And of course, he's not going to take advice from her. He just wants to have sex. He just wants to end up in bed having sex with her. Then another great song that, like you said, you hear all the certain songs at the ball game, especially in the minors. Put Me in, Coach. I could listen to that song.
Yeah, Put Me in, Coach. I don't know if this song's in there, but that Cheeseburger in Paradise, Cheeseburger in Paradise. That's one of them songs you just hear. And, like I was saying earlier, like, growing up in North Carolina, like baseball is pretty prominent around here. It's, a lot of good college teams, a lot of, and we do have a lot of minor league, teams in this area. So yeah, the culture is very, I wouldn't say baseball, obviously as the years have gone on, baseball is not as popular as other sports, but, playing it in the area and stuff like that, there's a great, tradition of baseball and people that really follow the sport. It's a good community. It can be toxic, like any fan base can be toxic, but for the most part, I'd say at least in North Carolina, it's all pretty. It feels pretty genuine, and I like I've been to some of these small towns like where Durham is, with Durham, where it's small towns where the whole town is like kind of like all in on the team in that area. Like it's kind of like any of these shows you've seen, like Friday Night Lights, where the whole town is like in on the team, no matter, even though it's a high school team, everybody's like wants to know about the players, and it's like that. It's kind of an intoxicating vibe, and it's fun. It's great.
And I live in a small town as well. We don't have a minor league baseball team, but we have a university, a college, and the college baseball team is one of the prides of the town. I mean, they went to the super regionals and lost to North Carolina of all teams. Talking about Durham, North Carolina, they ended up losing to the University of North Carolina. They could have won. They almost hit a grand slam by less than a foot to take the lead in the first game. Then almost got a 3-run home run in the second game by less than a foot. They lost 2 games by less than 2 feet. They could have taken the lead in both games and forced a third game on either game, but they didn't, and they ended up losing both twice to North Carolina. And so Stetson is knocked out of the college baseball playoffs in North Carolina, moves on to the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. So, but the pride of Stetson in DeLand was a huge, huge thing this year. And over the years, it's been one of the great things for this town, how successful the baseball team has been. So in going back to, what Annie was trying to do was channel some of Lelouch's energy into pitching and into coordination and hand-eye coordination and stuff like that. And so she was doing different things with him. Hey, could you take this part of my underwear off?
I was gonna say he decides to wear his ladies' underwear, to I don't know. I can't remember what they say, like to help with his like inner balance or something. I don't know. It's something weird.
Hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, it's like okay.
So but he believes in holding the underwear and having the underwear and stuff like that. So it's something that he thinks that she's telling him the truth, that what she's saying is the right thing. Then he starts talking about Crash and whatnot, some of the things Crash is doing. And so she goes to confront Crash about some of the things Crash is doing. Because, that's her boy. Crash is messing with her boy. So she's going to go defend her boy to Crash. So then kind of an interesting scene. He kind of gets a little weirded out, Nuke does, because his dad is there. But then he takes his dad over to see Annie. And, Annie's like, okay, how you doing, sir? Da, da, da. But she doesn't really want anything to do with meeting Nuke's dad.
Yeah.
The fathers, it's weird that the fathers do this to kids, young guys, like the kids don't want them around. Like, dude, leave me alone. Let me just do my job. And
look, I mean, like you got to think this is technically probably a person that's like in their early 20s, even though Tim Robbins doesn't look like he's 20 or 21. He looks like he's 30 something by now, which he probably was in real life. But that's how it is with young baseball players, man. Their parents, like I know my dad, very involved in my brother's game still, as he plays minor league ball, and he helped him through his whole life, so they feel a certain sense of not entitlement, but just pride in going to see something that they helped build. They live through their sons and daughters. They can they get enjoyment out of it. So it's
parents live vicariously through their children.
Yeah, and obviously with Lelouch's character, he maybe felt a little bit of a I would say a little not embarrassed, but like did not want to start something with his family with him, like with like an older woman, so he just decided to get the young girl. That made more sense.
Yeah. And then of course, with all this stuff going on, the Bulls start losing again. But even though the Bulls start losing again, we have some good news. Nuke Lelouch has been called up to the big show. And of course, he goes around, he starts talking to people about, hey, I've been called up to the big show. And then of course, some people aren't necessarily happy about him going up to the big show, because they know they basically know if he goes to the big show, that means their time on the team is probably very short-lived.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Costner has a very reactionary reaction, really abrasive reaction to the news, like you said, he feels like he was the only reason he was being kept around in the first place, was just to bring this guy along. And also knowing that, with the fact that his days are already numbered as it is, because he's, been in the league he's like 32 years old and he's playing minor league ball. I mean, guys ain't going to keep getting paid by the major league teams once they get past a certain age. They feel like their investments are already kind of they're done with. So because baseball is a young man's game. You know, you got to get them young and get them along as quickly as you can. And Crash is having a kind of an identity crisis, I think, of sorts. So
yeah, absolutely. So he's at the pool hall and he introduced him to a guy by the name of Sandy Grimes, and he talks about how Sandy was a player in the league and he was a pretty good hitter and whatnot. And then they end up getting in a fight and he punches him in the eye.
And then Kevin Costner's just like, just like, what,
And then going back to Millie again, we had a scene where Millie, of course, she's going down the list of players. She's going which one she can, and she ends up meeting up with Jimmy. And one thing leads to another, and something happens to Millie because either Jimmy rubbed off on Millie or Millie rubs off on Jimmy because they're getting married. And they're having a wedding at the end of the game. So what do you think? You think it was the Christian and Jimmy that rubbed off on Millie? Or
it's
sexual wiles rubbed off?
If you were to believe in, if I'm going to bring in my own philosophies of love, I would assume it's both ways. One rubbed off on the other. One found something that each of them found something in each other that they liked, and that it worked. So I mean, it is not usually one way or the other.
And going back to Crash again, he gives advice to Nuke about. He says, "Fear and arrogance, not ignorance. Fear and arrogance, not."
Also, when he punched him in the eye, he said, "Never punch a guy, with your pitching hand."
Yeah. Guy with your pitching hand, which is, yeah, you don't want to mess up your pitching hand. That's all your money. That's where your money is. And then we get the bad news. We knew this was coming because of Nuke going up to the big show. Crash gets let go by the coach, but he gives him some advice. He says, "Hey, Vidalia might be looking for a coach, and maybe you could be a coach."
Yeah, where one door closes, another one opens. And I think, like I said, like I was saying earlier, the character's going through this kind of arc of, he's kind of he knows he's like in his last days, and he's just trying to hang on to something that he knows is basically over. He loves the game and just hasn't realized how he can still be a part of it until he's offered kind of given the chance to be a coach. And he realizes, hey, I'm kind of good at teaching people how to be better than bringing out the best in players, because I was a player. And I think I can do that for other young players. And it's a lot of coaches, managers like that in real life, that have become very successful from being, once players. You got Joe Girardi for the Yankees, Mike Matheny for the Cardinals,
Joe Torre.
Like a lot of great managers once were players, and it's a benefit, to know where they're coming from.
A lot of catchers,
because catchers, like I was saying earlier, catchers have to manage the game. They set the pace. Them and the pitcher set the pace of the game, and it's they make perfect managers.
Yeah, they really do. So Crash goes to Annie to basically break the news to her, but she already knows, because we know she
kind of knows things. She knows things.
Yeah. So they end up having, because he's not a player anymore, and she knows Nuke Lelouch is going to the show. They end up having passionate sex and for quite a while.
Fornication, as we would sit now again. For like 3 days or something, like just laying in bed for 3. This montage of love making, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, there was, and of course then he makes breakfast, and then they go back to partying again.
Dancing, a lot of dancing and stuff like that.
And then we got another song, which for the time it was a good song. the 60-minute man. The 60-minute man. He laughed.
What that means?
Say that again.
And I wonder what that means.
Yeah. And he ends up leaving, but he heard that Asheville in the Atlantic Division was looking for a catcher. So he ends up going to Asheville, and we come to find out that he gets his 247th home run, which is the minor league record for home runs. But wouldn't you know it, nobody cares. It's not news to anybody.
I think it was maybe what he realized now that he kind of, I think, he knew he had happiness beyond baseball, that he could go, and I think he had a certain sense of pride, even though he was in a sense kind of ashamed of it. He had a pride to break that record, like personal pride to do it. He loved it, but he knew that from other people's perspective, it would be kind of like, a dubious record to have. Like, oh, you're the guy that held the record for the most home runs in the minor leagues? Really? But for him personally, he has a respect for the game, and he's like, yeah, I did a good job for a long time. So
yeah, absolutely. He ends up coming back to Annie, and this is where I believe that she kind of settles down and realizes this is really the man she's supposed to be with when she's walking in the rain and he's sitting on the porch. She realizes, and he realized that his career was over, that he wanted to settle down with her and let her know that.
Like a lot of I don't know that I would call it, I don't know if it's a cliche, but like a lot of women, I think if I remember in her opening kind of like voiceover, she talks about how her father was into baseball. I think like it was in her family. So like a lot of women looking for men that are very much like their father. And maybe, she was looking for, that's why she kept going after baseball players every year, was she was trying to find a baseball man to be the guy, and this was, of course, finally a more mature man that was more her age that fit that criteria. And I think, they were perfect for each other.
Yeah, they really were. You couldn't have asked for a better pairing. And then she gives him a quote, which I thought was very poignant at the time. I see great things in baseball, from Walt Whitman. And when I heard that, I was like, you know what? It's the kind of game that the game of baseball is it's got a classic sense to it. It has like a greatness to it in a way that you just can't quantify, and people like Walt Whitman, great poet, and those are the type of people that can really, like Ken Burns' documentary, can really show how great and how many people just love and how true this game is to so many different personalities and types of people and walks of life, other countries and so forth. Saves a lot of lives, and that's what. So when I heard that from Annie, I thought that was a very poignant thing for her to say.
Yeah, I think how I see that quote is like that. There's like between the lines of baseball, like there's like I was saying earlier, like a romanticness, a classic, as you would say. Like there's in like even between the lines of baseball, when it's just nothing's going on, there's always something there, and that's and in this case, that's the story that you just see is the movie of Bull Durham. There's all that baseball stuff that was happening, but underneath it was this romance that happened. There's things that happen around baseball that are great, that you don't always see unless when you're not paying attention, but it's there. And, that's what I think that quote means, is that when you're not paying attention, there's other great things about baseball that, makes the game, makes it such a great game. So,
yeah, it really does. And then, at the end, we get an interview with Nuke, Calvin LaLoosh. And of course, what does he say?
Says all of the stuff that Kevin Costner told him.
Catch the ball, hit the ball. And in the interview, he was very professional. And so he did learn from Crash Davis. In the end of the movie, he learns the things he needs to learn to be where he is.
We also, and of course, he also learned from Susan Sarandon too. You know, to listen. You know, which that was the whole Walt Whitman thing. You know, reading him poetry while he was tied up in bed was a matter of teaching him patience. You know, like, we'll get to the lovemaking, but first you got to listen to me spat some poetry. You know, and you know, he learned patience. He learned to listen. And that's what you have to do when you're, you know, doing interview. You're in the public eye. You have to make sure that you're being very mindful, and you have to listen, and you have to think before you speak. And that's what he learns from her, you know, how to be more professional, I think, while Crash Davis teaches him mostly more about fundamentals of the game, you know, and she teaches him how to be more mature, you know.
Absolutely. And so with this being the 30th anniversary of Bull Durham, you know, you and I are big baseball fans, and we're big sports fans. We're sports movie fans, you know. Where does Bull Durham, in your mind, in these 30 years, how does it hold up, and how does it have relevance amongst movies, sports movies? How essential is Bull Durham, in your opinion?
Well, I would say it's definitely up there. You know, of course, it's a baseball film that's, like we've said at the beginning, not just about the baseball, but it has this great romance in it. But you know, it's also a movie that's not about a major league team. You know, it's about a minor league team. It's a little bit different, a little bit more, I would say, personable. You know, you know, some people much prefer a film like Major League, or, you know, something that is involved in the actual playing of the game a little bit more. And them are great. And them are some of my favorite ones too. But, you know, sometimes I think the thing that makes this particular baseball movie great is that it encapsulates the themes of baseball, like the ideas of baseball and the feeling I get when I think of baseball, not just the act of it. You know, it gives me, like I've been saying throughout this video, the romance of baseball. Like, it get not just the relationship stuff, but the feeling I get when I think about baseball, when I hear the crack of the bat, when I, you know, smelling a glove. Like, it makes you think about them things in the right ways. So that's what I think is relevant about this Bull Durham's place in baseball films. And also, of course, Kevin Costner is so iconic in sports movies that it's just hard not to, you know, think of this movie because he's in it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head with the word romance. You mentioned it. There's a real romance to the game of baseball. And so we have a romance, but there's also the romance of the game, how you can fall in love with this game and the little things. And you said, I say the smell of the grass. You know, you go out there on the field and you smell the grass, and it's, you know, you're on a baseball field, you know, and obviously this spawned a real life romance. Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins ended up getting married, and they have been married ever since. So this is, not only did we have the marriage in the wedding in the movie, but we ended up getting a real life marriage out of this. Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins fell in love, and Kevin Costner goes on to be one of America's most iconic actors and then director. And anytime I see Kevin Costner in anything, whether the movie is good or whether the movie is bad, I always look forward to seeing Kevin Costner in the movie because he's one of my all-time favorites. And so I definitely think this movie is one of the most essential sports movies. And with this being the 30th anniversary of this film, it really is a great time. We're in the middle of baseball season. We're in the middle of the summer. it's a great time to be talking about a great baseball movie with so many great elements and so many great things. Ron Shelton really kind of put his thumb on the pulse of what America was looking for in a sports movie.
And you'll be able to get it on the Criterion Collection in July, so that'll be a good edition of it. It'll probably have extra special features that you'll get in deep on the movie and stuff. So yeah, look out for that.
And I know Steven and I are both going to get that. So, Steven, where can you be found?
I'm on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Cinema Discovery Project, and I'm YouTube Film Club Central. I still do a lot of comedy sketches and stuff like that. So,
and you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also at From the Fourth Row. Also, if you want to read my reviews, you can go to cinesportstalk.com. 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 So I just want to say thank you, Steven, for coming back for this special episode of the 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter. I knew I could count on you to really give a good in-depth and poignant discussion about a baseball movie, something I know baseball is close to your heart. So thank you again.
No problem.
And for Steven and myself, good night.